Following the overthrow of Go-Daigo, Takauji restored the Jimmuin branch to the throne. This move once again reduced the emperor to a puppet, a largely symbolic figure with limited practical authority. A descendant of the prestigious Saiwa Genji, Takauji was named shogun in 1338, translating his ambition into reality. Despite his defeat, the stubborn Go-Daigo did not relinquish power, setting up a rival court in Yoshino, located just over 40 kilometers south of Kyoto. This schism gave rise to the new names for the rival branches. The Jimmuin branch, ruling from Kyoto, became the northern court, and Go-Daigo's Daikakuji branch became the southern court. Takauji based his shogunate out of Kyoto. This marked a shift from the last shogunate, the Kamakura shogunate, which ruled from Kamakura in the Kanto region, creating a situation where there were two power bases, the shogunate in Kamakura and the emperor in Kyoto. By ruling from Kyoto, the imperial capital once again became the political heart of the nation. Nevertheless, the shogunate did maintain a presence in Kamakura. The title of Kanto Kamrei was created. First held by Ashikaga Yoshiakira, it ended up passing on to the descendants of Takauji's second son, Ashikaga Motouji. Although the shogunate was headed by Takauji, it was governed by his brother Tadayoshi, with Takauji managing military affairs. The brothers had waged the campaign against Go-Daigo together, and their cooperation continued into the Muromachi period. The existence of two rival courts caused decades of conflict, known as the Nambokucho period. In 1338, at the Battle of Fujishima, Nita Yoshisada died. The man who had laid siege to Kamakura, putting the nail in the coffin for the first Bakufu, had remained loyal to Go-Daigo. Go-Daigo himself died the following year, and he was succeeded by his son, Emperor Go-Murakami. The southern court continued to put up a fight, at times even managing to conquer Kyoto. One such instance stemmed from a rift that had opened up in the shogunate. A bitter rivalry emerged between Ashikaga Tadayoshi and the brothers Kono Morinao and Kono Moriyasu. Morinao had helped to defend Kyoto against the southern court's forces under Kitabatake Akiye in 1338, and led an army into Yoshino in 1348. Although he found that the southern court had abandoned their capital, the attack caused the death of Kusunoki Masatsura, the son of Masashige. The two brothers advocated for reforms such as abolishing the shogun, which Tadayoshi was strongly opposed to. Morinao even became Shitsuji. In time, this title became known as the Kyoto Kanrei. Morinao appeared to have been on top in the rivalry, influencing the phasing out of Tadayoshi's role up to the point that he took the tonsure in 1350. Subsequently, he joined the southern court and called for the killing of both Morinao and Moriyasu. The brothers were killed in 1351 en route to Kyoto. Tadayoshi died a year later, likely poisoned at the orders of Takauji. In light of these internal struggles, forces aligned to the southern court were able to capture Kamakura from Takauji for a short period of time in 1352. That same year, Kyoto was also seized, but the southern court was soon pushed out, although the city continued to be under threat for the following years. In 1353, Kyoto was taken by the southern court before being recaptured by shogunate forces under both Takauji and his son Ashikaga Yoshiakira. In 1358, Takauji died, and was succeeded by Yoshiakira as the second shogun of the Ashikaga Bakufu. Although conflict between the northern and southern courts persisted for several more decades, the Ashikaga Bakufu was able to consolidate its control. After staging some more failed attacks, the main southern court general, Kusunoki Masanori, gave up the fight in 1369. The prevailing wind was only blowing in one direction. Under the reign of Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, the shogunate's power reached its zenith. Although his reign lasted from 1368 to 1394, he continued to exercise large amounts of power following his retirement. His rule witnessed the dwindle in power that was the southern court. One remaining area of resistance was the island of Kyushu, where Takauji had begun his march to Kyoto from. Kyushu had been controlled by one of the sons of Go-Daigo, Prince Kanayoshi, who had been ordered there by his rebellious father in 1336. He did not arrive until 1340, when he landed on the eastern coast of the island around the province of Hyuga. The title Seisei Shogun entrusted him with the oversight of affairs in western Japan. Kyushu was finally suppressed by the shogunate in 1381, after a decade-long campaign by Imagawa Ryushin. However, the Southern Court's destruction did not end with these events. In 1392, both courts agreed to end the Nambokucho Wars. The Southern Court's Go-Kameyama agreed to turn over the 3 sacred treasures to the Northern Court Emperor Go-Komatsu. The Southern Court appears to have held the understanding that there would be a return to the alternating succession that had plagued the imperial family in the later Kamakura period. However, this did not materialise, and the descendants of the Northern Court continued to rule to this day. Along with the end of the Nambokucho conflict, Yoshimitsu's rule marked a significant strengthening of central authority under the Ashikaga Bakufu. Rebellions by the Akamatsu in 1383 and the Uchi in 1399 were suppressed. Another rebellion was staged by the Yamana, who had been allies of the shogunate for many years and therefore had built up extensive landholdings, controlling 11 provinces. Seeking to curb their power, the Bakufu attempted to confiscate part of their territory. However, the Yamana fought back, beginning the Meitoku War, which involved the Battle of Uchino in Kyoto in 1392. The Yamana lost at Uchino, with their leader Yamana Ujikiyo dead, and after the conflict most of their lands were taken away from them. In the meantime, the Wako pirates had been ramping up their activity off of the Korean coast. Although the Wako had been raiding coastal areas across East Asia for decades, the attacks escalated sharply after 1350, even threatening the Korean capital of Kaesong. The activity reached such an intensity that Korea had to send envoys, such as in 1366, in a bid to subdue the pirates. These clearly saw little success because Korea under both Koryo and later the Joseon dynasties felt that it was necessary to invade the island of Tsushima on 3 separate occasions. Tsushima straddles the Korea Strait, and it was one of the centres of Japanese piracy. The largest of these invasions came under the Joseon in 1419. Korea obviously fought the pirates along the Korean coast as well as invading their enemy's homeland. One such example was the Battle of the Kum River Estuary in 1380. The Wako did not just affect Korea, they also threatened the Chinese coast too. The Ming dynasty, like the Yuan before them, attempted to draw Japan back into China's system of tributary states. This was performed diplomatically, and as part of the contact, requests were made to stop the Wako. In 1369, the Ming sent over an envoy to relay these 2 goals to the Japanese. However, on this occasion, the envoy made contact with Prince Kanayoshi in Kyushu, rather than the shogunate, so the requests were unsuccessful, and many on the Ming mission were killed. Some contacts with Kanayoshi in the future were met with a more friendly response. However, Wako activity perhaps unsurprisingly continued. Somewhat reluctantly, the Ming had to make contacts with Yoshimitsu, following the defeat of the Southern Court. Yoshimitsu had unsuccessfully attempted to establish relations in both 1374 and 1380 by sending envoys to China. After the Ming mission to him at the turn of the century, he was able to strike a friendly relationship with them, which included his acceptance of the title, King of Japan, and he used this when communicating with China. This act brought the nation back into the tributary system. Japan began to send tribute ships to China using the tally system in 1404. By 1547, 17 missions had been made. Yoshimitsu's rule also saw Japanese culture flourish. His reign formed the core part of the Kitayama period, which saw significant shifts in Japanese culture. Yoshimitsu himself was involved in the new cultural movements. He became a follower of Zen Buddhism, learning from the priest Gido. The symbol of the Kitayama period is Yoshimitsu's golden pavilion. However, it was not the only major construction of his time. Early in his reign, he also built the Hana no Gosho, the Palace of Flowers, in the Muromachi district of Kyoto, which served as the shogun's residence, This gave rise to the name the Muromachi period. Although the golden era was reached under Yoshimitsu, the shogunate's power soon came crashing down. A series of revolts and rebellions broke out under the former monk Ashikaga Yoshinori's rule. Yoshinori came to power after a succession crisis, following Ashikaga Yoshimochi's death. In 1428, the year before Yoshinori's rule, large peasant protests engulfed the Kinai region, known as the Shocho no Tsuchi-iki. It wasn't just the peasants who were becoming more belligerent, but the monks too. In 1434, there was a riot in the Enryakuji temple on Mount Hiei, which before he became shogun, Yoshinori had been the head of. Another significant rebellion took place in the Kanto region, led by the Kanto Kubo. This title was the descendant of the Kanto Kanrei, and it was a title of higher rank, although the Kanrei role was later re-established as a deputy to the Kubo. By Yoshinori's rule, the Kanto Kubo was Ashikaga Mochiuji, who had aspired to succeed Yoshimochi as shogun, but this never came to fruition. Mochiuji continued to harbour resentment toward Yoshinori for obtaining the position, and became increasingly rebellious. His aggressive nature had already caused serious tensions, causing the Kanto Kanrei Uesugi Zenshu to rebel between 1415 and his death in 1417. The next time Mochiuji would come into conflict with his deputy would be the cause of his downfall. The successor of Zenshu, Uesugi Norizane, had been pursued by Mochiuji's forces in 1438 with the aim of assassinating him. The shogunate finally decided to deal with Mochiuji in a campaign that resulted in him committing seppuku in 1439. His followers kept up the fight, holding out in Yuki Castle for a year before finally being defeated in 1441, concluding the Aikyo Rebellion. The conclusion of the Aikyo Rebellion did not lead to a return to centralised control amidst this chaos. Yoshinori was assassinated in 1441 by the head of the Akamatsu clan, Akamatsu Mitsusuke. The shogun had fallen into a trap. Mitsusuke had invited Yoshinori to his residence, where Yoshinori was killed. Mitsusuke was not to last long following this deed, as he was pursued by the shogunate, with forces that consisted of various clans, including the Yamana clan. The Yamana forces were the ones who entered Harima province, where Mitsusuke had fled to. Mitsusuke committed seppuku, and the Yamana received Akamatsu domains, including Harima, as a reward. The assassination of Ashikaga Yoshinori underscored the decline in power of the shogunate. However, an even greater crisis loomed: the Onin War, which would ultimately shatter what remained of the Bakufu's control. In the years leading up to that conflict, peasant uprisings intensified across the country. A large Ikki took place soon after Yoshinori's death in 1441, during which revolters threatened Kyoto and forced the Bakufu into making concessions related to debt cancellation. Further revolts took place in 15 separate years between 1441 and 1466. The 1462 revolt saw destructive fires in Kyoto. The Kanto again became a centre of conflict in 1454. The Bakufu appointed a new Kanto Kanrei to succeed Mochiuji, and he picked up his predecessor's conflict with the Uesugi. He killed Uesugi Noritada, which required the shogunate to again send troops into the region. The 1462 Ikki may have been destructive, but it paled in comparison to the devastation wrought by the Onin War just a few years later. In the conflict, areas of Kyoto were intentionally set alight to clear any buildings. This allowed the mounted samurai archers to operate without the fear of being ambushed by hidden soldiers. The war broke out in 1467 due to conflict between two members of the Hatakeyama family, who alternated the title of Kyoto Kanrei with other families. These two members were Hatakeyama Yoshinari and Hatakeyama Masanaga. Both men had been fighting for years over their claims as Hatakeyama Mochikuni's successor, with the shogun flip-flopping over who to support. Masanaga had the backing of the Hosokawa, and Yoshinari had the backing of the Yamana. Fighting centred around Kyoto, beginning with skirmishes near the Kamikoryo shrine. As the conflict escalated, various clans began to move troops to Kyoto to fight on behalf of either side. The Akamatsu seized the opportunity to invade Yamana territories, like Harima, that had been transferred to the clan following the aftermath of Yoshinori's assassination. The Hosokawa-aligned forces were known as the Eastern Army, and the Yamana-aligned forces were known as the Western Army. A major ally of the Western Army was the Uchi clan, who had been one of the clans suppressed under Yoshimitsu's rule. Though weakened, the Uchi retained control over Western Honshu, a strategic position that allowed them to blockade the inland sea during the conflict. Another key battle in 1467 was the Battle of Shokakuji. Shokakuji was the family temple of the Ashikaga, but even it was not spared from the destruction. It was set alight by a monk at the behest of the Western Army. Control of the temple changed multiple times, and the battle was a bloody one. The Onin War ultimately proved indecisive. After years of fighting and destruction, the conflict settled into a stalemate that gradually spread beyond Kyoto into the provinces. With the deaths of the protagonists Yamana Sozen and Hosokawa Katsumoto in 1473, both sides began to lose steam, and the war finally came to an end in 1477. Though the fighting ceased, the consequences of the Onin War were profound. The power of the Ashikaga shogunate was forever weakened, and as a result the nation saw the development of a decentralised structure, where clans and their warlords came into conflict with each other. The Onin War also left a legacy in the form of increased participation amongst the peasants in combat. Whilst the peasant uprisings had grown over the past century, the Onin War saw the beginning of the Ashigaru fighters. The Ashigaru came from lower classes like the peasantry, rather than holding a warrior pedigree. They were utilised frequently in the Onin War, and were first directly mentioned after the 1468 Battle of Inariyama. The peasant participation in conflicts was present throughout the rest of the Muromachi period.